Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the last session today. We're doing education and community is the topic. And the first person speaking is Kristin Bott. And Kristin Bott is a member of the she is the Associate Director of the Instructional Technology team at Reed, where she works with faculty and students to integrate analytical R tools into their coursework, presentations, and teaching. She will talk about how to use R to build resources and support for users with diverse needs. Thank you, Kristin. Go right on ahead.
Okay. All right, folks. So thanks for having me. I'm here today to talk about the intersection of R, teaching, learning, and community. So a quick bit of context for me and where I'm coming from. So I work at Reed College here in Portland, Oregon. We are a small liberal arts college. So we've got about 1,400 students, 140 faculty. My department is instructional technology. So within our department, we have folks who focus just on particular aspects of the curriculum. So my purview is all things spatial and all things data related. So I work with faculty and students in R as well as other platforms, but R is definitely our most often used. So we've seen over the last 5 or 7 years a big uptick in our adoption across campus, which is really exciting, and is also why I'm here today, because I'm here to tell you the story of how we've responded to this increased user need without increasing staff. So to give you a quick sense of what our user base looks like, first off, we have faculty. So I was originally thinking I would describe these folks to you along a continuum of our experience level. And then I realized that we also needed to consider their expertise in tidyverse, because that's where we do most of our teaching. But the more I thought about this, the more complex the picture becomes, because it's not just these technical aspects that we're worried about, but also how confident faculty are and how comfortable they are. They might have different approaches to teaching code, and all of this is going to affect how I'm going to support them in using R in their teaching. So the take home here is that faculty are not monolithic. Second user group, by far the bigger of the two, of course, is our students. So on one end of the spectrum, you could be a student in a general chemistry class, so writing up your Chem 101 report in R Markdown, but not with really any other contact with R outside of that. On the other end of a spectrum, you could be a student in a data science class, so doing really in-depth data work with a bunch of different tidyverse packages, maybe putting together interactive dashboards on Shiny. And then between those 2 points, you have a fair amount of variety. So we have methods classes that I help support across a variety of disciplines. And then in other courses, you might see R for a lab here and there throughout a course, or maybe a single lesson, or maybe sort of peppered throughout the semester. So again, I'm the person who supports all of these folks with their potentially pretty diverse needs. Another useful thing to know when thinking about the student experience at Reed is that we have a required senior thesis. So in order to graduate, all students have to complete a year-long independent project. And for many students, this is the biggest academic undertaking of their undergraduate career. So these projects can be very interesting, they can be very nuanced, they can be very complicated. And many students are using tools that maybe they haven't used before, or they haven't used to this degree. And so there can be a lot of one-on-one support necessary in order to get students across that final finish line. So I feel like everyone in this virtual room can agree that teaching and learning and troubleshooting work best in a collaborative environment. You want to have a buddy to help you find that missing parenthesis, right? So if you think about this equation, we've got students on one side with their diverse experiences, faculty over here existing in this sort of multi-dimensional graph space, and on the other side, you have me. So the way that my department is able to meet all of these needs is largely thanks to the fantastic student worker team that I've assembled. So this is the folks that we had on staff last year. So you're looking at people who are coming from a wide diversity of backgrounds in terms of academic department, demographics, identities, and none of that is accidental. So when I recruit for these positions, I try to cast as wide of a net as possible because I believe a diverse team is a stronger team. And then when I hire, I'm looking for emotional intelligence as much as technical expertise because, I can teach you how to code. It's a lot trickier to teach someone how to be empathetic or how to respond properly to someone who comes in a moment of need. So to give you a sense of what this looks like on a day-to-day basis, we have a fairly limited budget, and so my students always work alone because we're trying to take the staff that we can afford and spread them out as much as possible so we can meet as many user needs as possible. So this requires that my students are very independent, they're very motivated. We connect with users by doing things like having drop-in hours. So you see here an example of the calendar. So these are periods when the students are available for code help, problem solving, and then when they're not directly working with users, maybe they're working on projects for my department, or maybe something that a faculty member has brought to me that we're working on as a team, or perhaps they're building other skills that are useful in this job or similar pursuits. So a quick pause here. So a project I'll be talking about quite a bit throughout this presentation, something that we worked on over the last year that I'm really proud of, is we overhauled our in-house R documentation. So these are specific pages that we've written in response to common student questions. So this is us trying to, again, be more available to students. So this way, if they can't catch us during open hours or if they need to refer back to something, they can go to these customized pages. So a quick pause here for anybody who had a moment when I said that my students work alone. So to be clear, they are not abandoned in the middle of nowhere. My office is right next to the room that they work in. The hours that they work are within the hours that I work. So I'm often available in person. I'm always available on Slack. And there's other internal communication tools that we use to keep us connected as folks work throughout the week. So I don't think any of these are unusual. I don't think any of this is groundbreaking. We keep in touch over Slack. That is largely asynchronous, but it still allows us to stay connected over things like projects. We use GitHub to host shared code. We share things over Google Drive. One thing that I found really helpful is every week I write up a project document. So this is a place for us to have a centralized experience in terms of what we're thinking about, what we're working on, what's coming next. And it allows folks to have a common start to their work week, whether that work week starts on Monday or on Wednesday. So I talked about that documentation overhaul, and one of the great things about that is it meant that the entire team learned GitHub last year. Thank you very much, Jenny Bryan. And if you look here in the repo, which is the link is on the slide there, you can see Simon, who was our resident GitHub expert, walking us all through what a PR is and sort of how that works. And if you look at the language that he's using here, it's very comfortable, it's very friendly, very accessible, which I think is very, very useful when you're teaching folks potentially complicated topics. So keeping with that friendliness theme, we also definitely make space in our work time to have other non-business discussions. So our crew picked up 2 puppies last year, so we had a puppy thread in Slack. And I think for many folks, the last year was really pretty isolating. So Layla had this idea, because we were all working remotely. So I was remote, my staff was all remote. Layla had this idea to start a document where folks could report in on what was going on in their weeks and, things that are good, bad, or otherwise in life. And it helped everyone stay really connected in a time that was otherwise pretty complicated. So switching to external communication, when we interact with users, our approach is very much people first, code second. So someone comes into open hours, and the first step is always to sort of get a sense of how they're doing. So ask some gentle questions, figure out what's going on. And then when you've identified the problem, you investigate together. And that might seem very basic, but I think there can be a temptation if you're the person with more technical background to, be the authority in the room. And I think it's a very different feeling and a very different experience if you're approaching things together. So continuing with that external communication theme and going back to Simon's accessible language example earlier from internal written communication, I feel like everyone in this room knows how useful comments are in terms of notes to your future self, making code understandable. So again, when we're having written leave behinds for our users, we try to keep those very accessible, useful, and in language that is easy to approach. So I wanted to take a pause here because I feel like up until this point, all of this may have sounded very lovely and open and expansive and blue skies. And I feel the need to tell you that I think one of the reasons why we're able to be successful is that we also have very clear boundaries. So in terms of my department, we are very well scoped. So we work on the academic side of the house, we work on curriculum. And my team, we are the code people, we are the method people. We do not do stats consulting, we do not do interpretation, because those things are better left to faculty. So being able to have those very clear lines drawn around what we do and don't do allows us to concentrate our energy and really better serve our users. And then if folks come to us with a request that's out of scope, we can kindly and lovingly redirect them to someone who's in a better position to meet those needs. So for the last chunk of my talk, I'd like to focus on making R fun and accessible, which I feel like has been a theme throughout this entire conference. So here's a couple of ways that we approach that here at Reed. And first off, we are absolutely not the only crew on campus who's trying to build a community around this and make this a good and engaging bit of scholarship. So for example, one of our stats professors, Kelly McConville, hosted a data visualization competition last fall. So this is one of the entries. It's the one that my students put together because it was the easiest one I could get my hands on. So this kind of thing, this competition provided students opportunities to practice. You've got a common data set, a common question, and then you put folks in teams and they get to figure out what they think the best way is to approach that or the best way to represent their answer. And I think it does a lot in terms of promoting engagement and making this fun and making this something that people want to work in, which again, hearing the talks today, I feel like this is a common theme. Like we love what we do and we're excited to see people engaged. And just for a second, if you look on the lower right-hand side of the slide, those sort of boxy things, those are waffle plots. If you haven't seen those before, I'll come back to those in a minute. So for folks who read the talk descriptions, I did promise you custom Slack emojis, and I do like to keep my word. So a quick story for you. So over the last year, Reed has seen a number of different approaches to instruction in the pandemic. So you have one end of the spectrum, folks who are entirely remote, the other end, folks who are entirely in person, and then just about every option in between. And my department works at the intersection of tech and teaching, and so this kind of stuff is really key to our work and really interesting to us. So my boss has this data, which is looking at different modes of instruction for both fall and spring. And she said, hey, do you think you can you do something with this? Can you help me make sense of this? And I said, sure. So I took this data, I gave it to my student crew and said, all right, folks, we've got a data visualization project. And so data here is on division, department, mode of instruction, and semester. There's some individual classes. This is all done by counts. So here we have a bar plot. Another student, another example, bar plot. We try again with a bar plot. So all of these are different. They're all good. They all tell different stories. They're answering slightly different questions, making different comparisons. Well, then Josh came on shift and said, you all made some awesome bar plots, and I'm still not over waffle plots, so I made waffle plots for each division, to which Simon said, pancakes. To which I said, I'm also not over waffles. And I took a minute from my workday and I went out and got us a collection of waffles. So this is not a deliverable. This is not anyone's strategic plan, goal, realize. But what's happening here is we're having this lovely discussion of waffle emoji rankings. And so this is not mission critical, but it is very fun. And I think it's important to have this kind of joy and this kind of sort of diversion in work, because it's just another way of getting folks engaged and sort of just adding, again, a little bit of fun to your workday. So the documentation project that I referenced a couple of times, and again, you can see the GitHub repo. This is working with the Palmer penguins data. So if you're not familiar, basic story is we have penguins and they live on islands. One of those islands is Bisco. And so if you look at the example on the slide, we're giving folks an example of some dplyr verbs in action by turning Bisco to biscotti, which was a delightful thing to discover when I reviewed the documentation. So my student crew came up with this on their own, to which Layla said biscotti emoji, to which I said biscotti emoji. So again, just another vote for taking the time to inject little bits of fun and joy into the workday, because I think this does a lot in terms of building a team, building community, and I think it's really worth your time.
Hi, Kristin. We have about maybe 30 seconds or so.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
So two last quick bits. So I love this quote from Lauren. So the lesson here is that not that she was understood and she was supported, but the fact that she took those experiences and is then transforming, using that to inform how she's interacting with other people, which I think is really great. Finally, this is really useful for my staff as well. So there's some quotes on here. Basically, this isn't just a win for our users, but it's also a win on the inside. And I'm sorry, I talked too long. My timer was not going. And if you want to talk about any of the stuff, please reach out. My contact info is on the slide. I will see you at the Q&A. Thank you.